Here we are on the Wedge Live podcast on the Bryant Avenue Bridge over Minnehaha Creek. Council member Linea Palmisano, Ward 13, running for re-election, council vice president. People said we would never get together.
People said we wouldn't.
And here we are.
I'm the devil you know, John.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
What do we have to say about the bridge?
Well, it just reopened, and it was closed like about mid-September, and I never really appreciated that how much people used it and really kind of relied on it as a passageway over the creek and for getting places until it closed, and everybody was really upset about that. You know, it's a park project, but then I learned it was because they were worried about one of the, like the other side has a plate underneath it. They, you know, just bridge maintenance, caution, out of an abundance of caution kind of thing. But lucky for us, in part because we have a full service public works department, different than other cities, very different from St. Paul. The park board was able to outsource it to our public works bridge department, and they fixed it and it's back open. Way back when, there used to be a streetcar bridge right next to it because the streetcar went down Bryant. Mm-hmm. And way back in like the late 20s, they were lobbying to have a streetcar. They had the streetcar bridge and they had this next to it. So I actually was kind of curious how and where the bridge came over, because they left this intact and just built the streetcar bridge like next to it. They sort of straightened the creek over time, like in the Worth days. This was an old bridle path. They said once upon a time that bikes were only a fad. They were popular for about 10 years.
They're still saying that.
But that might have been the old bike path.
It's very cold, and I was worried my brain would stop working, and I think maybe it is. It's like 30 degrees, right?
We're both a little out of our element here.
A council member has brought her giant cargo bike. So if
it's my bike.
That's your only bike?
I have another bike, but this is the one I'm most comfortable on.
Are you ready to ride Bryant Avenue and other streets?
I have yet to ride Bryant Avenue on my bike. I've been on it so many other ways and for so long, but not on my bike.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. So I appreciated your invitation and to show you a lot of things I've been seeing and working on and stuff on Bryant Avenue, but this is kind of where we were like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's where we still are in the Wedge.
They don't, to my knowledge, they won't even come and replace that anymore. We keep kind of evolving our bike facilities as a city.
You mean the bike boulevard thing, or replace?
Yeah, the Sharrows. Way back when, like 11, 12, must have been like 12 years ago, I worked to start this group called Southwest Pedal Power. And it was kind of like a
regional satellite of the bicycle coalition?
Yeah, exactly. It's the right way to say it. But it was specifically to advocate for a couple of north-south streets with this kind of treatment as like the big goal. And it was myself, my now husband, this guy Fred, who later on in my life does all my lawn signs. He did the design for my lawn signs, and Bill Dooley and Susan Preem. Actually, this used to be like the safest part of riding Bryant, right?
Right. Because
it was the least busy, and then this is where it would start to feel a lot less safe, but not anymore.
I like it. So people are saying a lot of things about Bryant Avenue. It's become one of the primary campaign issues.
Hasn't it been though? Isn't that amazing?
It is kind of amazing. And
how did that happen?
so, one of the things your opponent says, Kate Mortensen, is that she would have managed it better.
Managed it? But she's not a manager. She wants to make that clear.
Maybe I'm not using her words, but that's my interpretation of her words, that she would have managed it better, like the driveway thing and like, I guess, the street width thing. They've had to come and do some fixes.
Yeah, I think it's good that we're doing the fixes.
But like prevented them from happening in the first place.
Well, that's really interesting because, you know, designer plans and a street layout, sometimes it all works on paper and it doesn't actually work when you're trying to go at the speed of a car
Right.
in and out of your driveway, right? Like, you can probably manipulate that algorithm or whatever you're using to, on a computer, turn a car in and out of a driveway to like 0 miles an hour and get it to work, but not everybody has the same size vehicle. We want it to work, so we have widened a number of the driveways.
I'm a little skeptical of the criticism because you're not a street engineer, and like,
Yeah,
I don't know how you're supposed to catch whether the driveways are wide enough.
you
I don't
have
know
to
if any
kind of
council
trust
member-
what the professional engineers say, and I'm not a PE. And when they say this is the amount of space we have and this is what we can do with it, people have also alleged that we had a designer from California design this street, which couldn't be further from the truth because as you know, our head transportation planner that designed this street actually lives in the area, like in the neighborhood maybe.
I mean, so what if we had someone from California design this street? What do
Well,
we have against people from California?
They meant it wasn't designed for snow conditions at all.
Well,
And I appreciate that. I mean, I reflect the problems of the constituents in trying to make things better. And one of those was the snow conditions that people desperately wanted more parking back on this street. And we thought we could accommodate that with the converging one-way.
right.
That was why we have a one-way. You know, this public works project changed more than any public works project I've seen in the community engagement phase, which for the first time, because of COVID, was all online. The things most important to people were a slower street, a safer street, get the buses back to the main corridor of Lyndale. And we got some things wrong about this project, but we got those things really right. And one of the accommodations, one of the things that let us put, we thought, two-sided parking back in many places, not all, was the converging one-way. But in a snow condition, it just doesn't allow for driver's side egress, right? Like right into a snowbank, which leads cars to park further and further into the middle of the street, which then wouldn't allow many large vehicles to get by.
What are you learning from how people are reacting? Because it's easy to get the impression that, wow, everyone hates this. There was a group of people at one of the candidate forums who groaned over it, but that's like, I don't know, 100 people. That's not, maybe that's the people who are most energized over it, but what is the...
Did the guy next to you groan about it?
No, there was like a group of people in the center of the room who groaned over it.
The guy next to you is my husband.
Oh, really?
Just gotta be careful, right?
Is there a
I think
undercover
it's-
sentiment? Is there a silent majority of people who love it? Tell me there's a silent majority.
You know, I think, I'm not sure silent, I'm not sure majority,
Okay.
but we are winning hearts and minds out here. And I've been working on that since April when the snow started to clear and when, you know, there was that big public works meeting where Public Works apologized for the things that were not working well. Said, you know, their primary goal was to make sure that the next year of construction didn't have to stop or that we wouldn't replicate some of the same issues. And that was their first priority. And second, also urgent, and also this year, we'd be making modifications to make sure that this first phase, which is still here all the way up to 42nd, will work better for people.
I'm curious if you're learning anything about emergency vehicles. One of the real surprising things to come out of this is that apparently fire trucks need 20 feet
20-foot clear operational zone is what they say.
I live on good old Aldrich Avenue in the Wedge neighborhood, which gets extremely narrow in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And I doubt we have 20 feet of clearance.
Do you have parking on both sides of your block?
We do, yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's parking, then that gives them wiggle room?
Fire code, I have learned a lot in this project, and I can show you some of the different pieces and parts. But the operational zone, the 20-foot clear, isn't for the actual fire truck, right? A truck is not 20 feet wide.
Right.
It's the outriggers that have to go down and stabilize if you're going to deploy the ladder. So, you know, most calls for service in the fire department are medical, and so you're not using that ladder at all. But most calls for service don't require the outriggers to be down. But as we examine the corridor, and as we started having the problems in the winter, how it got narrower and narrower with an unbelievable amount of snow, we said, whoa, let's get the fire department out here again and really review this in the spring. And we ended up moving some of the light pedestals. We hadn't installed the lights, and then we didn't for a while in this new section until we had worked with the fire department to make sure that they had a place to anchor basically at any dwelling unit along the way.
I was watching the recent budget presentation from the fire chief, and he was talking about how bike lanes are posing challenges to emergency vehicles. Narrowed streets generally are becoming a challenge. And I've wondered this ever since the Bryant Avenue thing blew up. Is anyone making it a priority to maybe seek out smaller emergency vehicles? I read something out of San Francisco, how they've gotten some smaller trucks. They've re-engineered, they've requested from manufacturers some re-engineered trucks. So like other cities are thinking about this.
Some of these really narrow roads that they have to be able to provide with fire service. Our fire fleet is really expensive. I mean, it's funny, my boys get excited about like a fancy vehicle on the road, and their mom gets excited about a ladder truck, you know? That's the most expensive vehicle that I've ever seen, boys. I think it would take an extremely long time to change over our fleet, and I think what I know about our fleet is that it's pretty standardized on a truck chassis. So part of that is the interchangeability of parts and the ability to use other pieces and parts to get a vehicle back in service, because there's only 1 or 2 rigs per station. And they're in heavy use, right? Like, I think they go on twice the number of calls than they did 20 or 30 years ago, but they still have the same number of staff and they have less fire stations.
So it's not necessarily viable to say, we're going to acquire some new, smaller trucks.
I don't know about newer fire trucks, but I do think there might be a way to respond to medical calls that isn't taking a fire truck.
Okay.
I mean, that's something I'd like to work on my next term, and, you know, have been. Chief Friedel had explored that, and then it kind of dissipated. Also had explored what it would be to be a little more like St. Paul and have an ambulance service as part of ours, but I guess right now it would be seen as competing with Hennepin Healthcare. But it certainly would help the funds of the fire department and be able to afford some of the more innovative stuff. So here we're back to it, right? Where the GSI is over there, where the sidewalk and the bike lane are together.
Stormwater infrastructure for listeners.
330,000 gallons of stormwater capacity new in this project, which is pretty important when you think about our climate goals as a city. 1.5 acres of pervious surface in comparison to what it was before.
You've got stats.
Well, this is just what I've been prophesizing about this project for months and months, John. There's some really important climate things we're doing here, and people not on Bryant get upset about it because it's gotten whipped up into a campaign issue. This is making our lakes cleaner, our creek cleaner. These kinds of features, and we can't build them into every road, but when we fully reconstruct a street, it's an important feature. And here, we can maybe take a look at this one if you are willing. So this is one of the, I think, 60 GSIs. And they say it'll take 2 years to fully establish. We have a contract that will, it's a subcontractor, right? And this is in the things of ways we can, as a city, do this better.
I've seen on the news that, I don't know if it was Grand Avenue or also Bryant, where property owners on these new streets are like confused about how to take care of the landscaping. Like, is it our responsibility? Is it cities? I don't like how this looks.
For the first 2 years, it's the city's responsibility. One of the things that we've learned, I think we learned from Grand to do a little better here. We've learned here to do a little better on Hennepin and in the future. This is a very small portion, like the green portion of a very large bid public works project. And something that Don Elwood has been telling me that he's looking to maybe do differently is to bid the green stuff out separate so that we have more direct accountability instead of, it being a sub of a sub contractor and having them kind of not stop taking care of it too soon, not helping to get the stuff out the first couple of years, helping it grow appropriately so that you don't have weeds in it. You saw there's a big Star Tribune article about Grand and how they had to mow it all down and basically start again. We're sending out, and there's a couple of real stormwater champions on Bryant that are excited to help people learn about this and help make this a neat feature of their yard, of their front space. And I just think there's a lot that can be learned about it, even at the elementary school down there. I was talking to this girl running for student council about it last week. A lot of people take very careful care of their yard here as a point of pride, and then they're not quite sure what to do with this. Right. And it's part because it's not done yet. When we were looking in that phase 1 to maybe move some of those light pedestals around for that operational clear that the fire department wanted, we then didn't plant the trees. So we missed a planting window for the trees that would have also helped with these GSIs and that kind of infrastructure. We're still going to have trees. This street isn't done yet, and I think it's really going to be great when it is. I strongly object to the idea that I'm the status quo when we upended the status quo with Bryant Avenue. This is really the antithesis of the status quo. This is perhaps one of the most innovative streets that we have in Minnesota right now. And I think that the next major reconstruction will probably be the next one.
Friends of mine had relatives come from the UK and ride the street, and they were blown away. You're from Europe. Mm-hmm. Come on, this is just Minnesota. How are you this impressed with us?
My husband, who's from England, calls this the promenade, and I make him go on date nights on Bryant, right, to check out if the street lights are up yet and whatever, and I make him walk all the way up and down the stormwater the corridor, and I geek out about stormwater features, and it must be really fun having to be married to a council member. It must be horrible. But
let's get into one of your opponent's criticisms of you. Let's get serious here. You're a manager, so one of the things is you've been there 10 years. What do we have to show for it?
Wait. I got to show you this.
Okay.
In that idea of on paper these plans looked like they would work, I was going to free yoga at the bandshell one morning this summer, and I get a picture from Public Works. Council member, we have a problem. And there, someone had put a light pedestal, literally I think it was right up there. like where the awning was extended, right? Like where you're like, why would somebody put a light pedestal there? Clearly that wouldn't work with the awning, and but you know, the plan said to do it, and so somebody did it, and they're like, we get it, you might get some calls about this, we'll fix it, we just wanted you to see it before somebody else showed it to you. So for a long time there was just a big wooden box over it so that people wouldn't be like, oh my God, they're putting a light fixture so close. But from a property line perspective, this is the edge of the building, right? Like, it doesn't have awnings on an engineering plan. Sorry, back to your questions.
So 10 years.
10 years.
Linea
I'm
Palmisano.
a dinosaur, right?
You really
I'm
are.
a 6 and 12-year-old, and I'm a dinosaur. Thanks, John. I just lost that person's vote.
Don't you criticize my biking. You're the last council member left from the class of 2013.
Yeah, we have 36 years of institutional memory voluntarily stepping away from City Hall.
35 of it is Lisa Goodman.
Well, you know, the other piece too is most people have a whole term under their belt when there's a re-election. Now it feels, it's really only like half a term, right?
Yeah.
So the people who, I think, fair to say, most will be returning, have 2 years of experience. And that's not usually a thing, but it is this time.
How many votes are we costing you here?
Seriously. You know, Kate Mortensen does these like wave signs and cheer kind of events in the ward some mornings, and this is mine, I guess, with you. I remember walking in 2014, and there were 7 of us that were new at the time, and people were freaking out. Oh my God, the majority of the city council is brand new.
So young.
So
Can you
young.
imagine council members in their 30s?
Oh my God. They could pick their own council president with 7 votes. They could pick one of them.
Yeah.
So back then in 2014, you looked at who else was on the city council, and there were 56 years of experience there. We each had a mentor. Mine was Elizabeth Glidden. We each had, you know, someone to guide us to. I was vice chair of public works then, under the tutelage of Kevin Reich. And I learned a lot from helping to run some of those big public hearings at the time about light rail extension. This year, if everybody who is running for re-election currently on the city council ends up elected, I'll have the most tenure, and it's 10 years. I mean, I think Cam Gordon had that much tenure when I was in. And you never complain about him. He was around for 16 years. Was he a dinosaur, John?
He kind of was.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't complain about him.
Fair enough.
I didn't complain about him.
Been around too long?
I
don't think people thought he was around too long. I mean, you could agree or disagree with him, but...
I think a lot of people thought he was, I mean, he lost, right?
Yeah.
So what do we have to show
now,
for,
so what
for
we
10
have
years?
now? Oh, okay. Wait, let me just finish my other thought first.
Okay.
The bench ain't deep, John. I don't even know, you know, usually people with at least 4 years of experience gavel a committee, and we don't even have that.
Right.
The only people with more than 2 years, well, more than 3 years experience, because there's Jamal Osman had the special election, would be Council Members Ellison, Council President Jenkins, and myself.
Right.
And that's it. And the bench ain't deep. So what do I have to show for 10 years of this stuff? Sorry. Didn't mean to run you off the road. You know, this term, a lot of my work was behind the scenes. It was government restructure. Kate's criticism of me as a manager, I mean, she's not running for an executive role, right? Like, we switched the executive and legislative forms of government and made that very clear. So, you know, we run as individuals, but we have to govern as a body. And I don't know that there's executives of that body, I mean, council leadership. I think that this term, I got a chance to taste what that is, and something I hadn't been a part of before, but just speculate, is that, when the council president and the mayor and I sit down, we come with 3 really different perspectives to the table. And I know that you think I'm just a shill for the mayor most of the time, but I don't think you realize how much I disagree with him. I just don't do it, in dramatic ways made for cameras and Twitter. I think I disagreed with him 3 times last week. But I think
from the outside, it does appear that you are all on the same team.
I think we're on Team Minneapolis, and I think that's what Minneapolis needs right now, are people that can largely get along. You asked if I read RT's piece. I did. Yeah, I thought his comments about, when some of these people like Steve Kramer and Jackie Cherry Holmes and hey there, and others had come on, that they were seen as the wild progressives, and not to get too segmented into blocks, right? Like voting blocks, and he kind of cautioned against that, right?
Right.
And I think he has a point. I think that is something that gets a bit fraught.
So when you were first elected, 2013, you were the young progressive, I think, in Ward 13.
Yeah.
That's where you come from, and now it's been 10 years, and has the city changed? Have you changed? A little bit of both?
Yeah.
Because I feel the polarization. I don't think it's healthy.
Right. No. I mean, generally
it's not
speaking,
to say the things we disagree about aren't important.
Yeah, and I think it's that, right? Like, reasonable people can disagree. Maybe it shouldn't be waged as the next, who gets to call themselves progressive kind of purity test. I don't like, I like to be able to disagree with somebody, argue my point, have it not be, here, I'd like to show you that corner, basically. So if we go up here.
I've never noticed this kind of creek thing before.
Yeah. Water is shared between Harriet and Bede-Makaska. So this is part of the Sidewalk Gap program, in part because this is part of the new E-line, the bus rapid transit that we've been looking at and planning for 5 years. Well, Metro Transit has, and now is getting really pretty real, and people are talking about it more. We work to engage a lot of people, and Metro Transit ultimately decided the route, but there were a lot of engagement sessions, and I'm always surprised to how many people this is still brand new news. But the E-line will come through here, and this is the end of the streetcar museum trolley tracks, and there'll actually be a sidewalk through here and up on this side of Richfield Road, which I have a meeting about in a couple weeks. But my biggest concern about it is who's going to shovel it. Because I work pretty closely with the park board. They're really great about shoveling the paths around the lakes, but sometimes they forget about some of the sidewalks that they have agreed to clear. And one of them is this sidewalk on this side of all of these homes along the parkway. And shortly before my last election, traffic engineers made the very unpopular decision by the people that live around here to take out all of the parking and extend the bike lane around Richfield Road over to Sheridan. And that's that Sheridan becomes Upton, right, and goes almost all the way down to Crosstown. That was one of those big Sherrod bike boulevards that we lobbied so hard for back way before I even thought about running for council. But this is the connector to that goes up to 36th Street. So the point of this being like a missing link from the bike lane.
So you would agree, you're a political ally of the mayor, right?
I don't know that we...
That's true, right?
I think that I can disagree with the mayor on plenty of things. I mean, we disagreed on 2040, right? Still do sometimes.
Right. So you tout remember the body cam thing in 2017? That's on your website.
A lot of the.
And I felt like that's a good thing to have body cam compliance from MPD go way up. And I think, so you were aligned with the mayor, Mayor Frey, at that point when he was a candidate, and
Well,
against.
no, that was something that I did with the help of then Mayor Betsy Hodges.
Well, I remember that being an issue. Like, look at Betsy Hodges and
Here,
the body cam compliance
you want to
is
go ahead
low.
of me?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. It's getting very difficult. So my point being, I think people sense that police reform and police accountability and holding the administration accountable might be easier with someone a little less politically aligned with the mayor. If you're saying you do disagree with him in private.
I think I keep my disagreements. Yeah, I mean, I work to get along with the mayor. I worked to get along with the last mayor. What have I've disagreed with the mayor lately on things about the 3rd precinct, on some of the ways that we're handling or not handling the 2040 plan litigation.
Really? Tell me about that. I'm very interested in that.
As I said way back then, I made a lot of amendments to the 2040 plan, but I really felt that we had the right goals and we had the wrong plan. One of the big pieces of that was about affordable housing and building new affordable housing.
Right.
I didn't think that was going to work that way, basically in any corner of the city, including this corner, that this lower zoning just wasn't ever going to make affordable housing financially feasible.
Has that kind of been proven wrong though? Because the Public Housing Authority built, was it like 85 units of
6. Oh, you mean in the scattered site? Yes.
Yeah, those are in
6 in Penn and 51st and Penn.
Those were made possible by the 2040 plan
By different
and the
zoning, yes.
low density.
Fair enough, yeah.
Another thing is the rent control. And so, I totally understand where you're coming from on rent control, and it sounds like your criticism of that is that it would be harmful and it would impede housing supply in Minneapolis. 2040 plan's been celebrated, and a lot of national
places.
coverage is helping Minneapolis kind of combat housing inflation. And so it seems to contradict your position on rent control and the 2040 plan seem to be in conflict to me.
Wait a minute. First things, so let's start 2040 plan.
Okay.
I think I'll agree, we've absolutely gotten some more affordable housing, the scattered site plan for MPHA, out of some of the changes in zoning in the 2040 plan. I think we would have gotten far more affordable housing opportunities if we'd more densely zoned the nodes, right? Instead of just this stripe zoning everywhere, of being able to intensify places where there's commercial nodes and corridors.
So one of your problems is we didn't go dense enough in the commercial nodes?
You can't pencil a project that would give you affordable housing in 50th in France, 44th in France, 54th in Lindale. Those would be, if people said, tell me how to get more affordable housing in your part of the city, and let's work on a comprehensive plan that does that, there would be more intense zoning in nodes.
So that's the thing you would change about the plan is increased density.
It's one thing I would change.
Would you eliminate the triplex zoning thing?
I don't know. I don't know that the only triplex changes we've really seen around here have been like $1 million triplexes, right? Do you remember when this was the big Linden Corner
I do
debacle,
remember that.
right?
You got a lot of hate over that. People
did.
hated you for this building, and it seems fine to me.
It's
People got
pretty
used to it,
minimal.
right? Is it kind of a non-issue now?
I think it's kind of a non-issue. Here's a piece that I'm honestly kind of conflicted over, right? One of the pieces of the 2040 plan is supposed to give consistency to what can be built. That's supposed to help get more housing out of it. Right. But yet, one of the pieces of having to go through a variance process is like, for example, to this building, this corner was especially important to the community, right? The pocket park is what they kept talking about.
I remember it as a giant parking lot. A giant, terrible parking
frontal
lot.
parking lot. Yeah, I have some
Famous
funny.
Dave's.
My first election, I had my election night party at that Famous Dave's. I think we closed it down for good. It was a raucous event.
I don't know how you're doing it with that bike.
This building too, on your left.
Oh, this one? That's
yeah,
a more
the
recent
old
one.
Sebastian Joe's parking lot.
Have people recovered from that one?
I think so.
How is parking in Linden Hills? I remember that being a big issue. Can people park?
Yeah, you know, there used to be a pedestrian overlay for Linden Hills that was about mandatory parking minimums. So I think every I forget the details, but we removed all that and went through this big, with the Linden Hills Small Area Plan, rezoning study, and we really did a lot that frankly upzoned and made more consistent 43rd and Upton and 44th and France and that barbell between them, right? 44th Street. And then Minneapolis 2040 went and downzoned some of it.
Yeah, there were pieces of the Wedge that got downzoned.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember. I'm not as familiar with the Wedge.
Yeah, some of like Whittier and the Wedge had a lot of interior blocks that were like R6. And
Okay.
so one of the impacts of the 2040 plan was to downzone some of those places.
You know, the most affordable housing units have ever gotten approved in the 13th Ward is now the new part of Ward 7. Up by the Westlake Quarters is what it will be called. I'll also admit there's some good designs further out of my ward, but the Bryant Avenue lofts, right? Just north on Bryant from where we turned off of it.
Is that the Sean Sweeney thing?
Of it. Well, in my ward, there's that Colo place, right? And that's the new part of my ward, Old Ward 10 on Bryant. I think it's Colo. But then up around, is it 33rd, 31st in Bryant maybe? Definitely in the new construction section is how I have been keeping tabs on it, so to speak. But the Bryant lofts are maybe, I don't know what that would have been zoned before, but I think that's an interesting example of, I mean, is it relatively affordable? I don't know, but they're these fairly small but really nice looking new units.
So I've had the chance to ask this question to some like more progressive, sorry I used the word progressive, but like people on the left, I asked them about rent control. And like I think of it in terms of the minimum wage. We can debate like at what level does the minimum wage start being harmful?
Should it be $20 an hour?
Right. Yeah. And so why can't we agree that like at some level of rent increase, we've got a consumer protection issue. It becomes predatory. Is there room to come to an agreement on rent stabilization that way? Like I agree on the concept, we should set it at a level. It's just, I disagree about what that level is because it feels like the more moderate side of the council is just rejecting the idea entirely.
I think, have you seen an example where rent control at any clip has worked out for the benefit of renters?
I think there's some debate in the literature about whether it is as harmful as people say it is. And for individuals, like it's undoubtedly a benefit if there is some regulation in place saying, no, your rent can't go up. Because that's how I tend to think of it, is like, this is a renter protection, it's consumer protection.
I think with limited resources and limited funds and needing to build all of the infrastructure, the regulatory infrastructure for something like that. I think I still, in today's terms, I don't know what tomorrow it brings, would lean toward we should keep working on the things we know work and have produced more housing, right? Like something good, maybe about the zoning in the 2040 plan is the addition of a lot of the missing middle categories, right? Like that's not something I ever really, well, you know me, I've never been on like the land use committees. That's not something I've ever really touched. I did like 16 zoning text amendments my first term on 1 to 4s, right? 1 to 4 units. And those are still largely in place. But the missing middle is what, like 4 to how many units? And I think we've actually seen a fair amount of growth in that. I'm not sure if that's because of the 2040 plan or not.
Might be the parking reform.
I think it's a lot more the parking reforms, because I think those Bryant Avenue lofts would not have been doable without the parking reform.
You remember the story from the reformer about all the promotions the chief did and the problems with a bunch of them? Did you read that? I'll give one example.
Which chief?
Our current chief, or police chief. And so the 5th precinct inspector, the new one, had an incident where she like misstated some things that had been told to her by an officer involved in a use of force. She basically covered up for the use of force. And I'm not asking you to speak to that case necessarily, but it makes me wonder, like, because I kind of like the new police chief.
What makes you like our new police chief?
I think he's comes across as honest and straightforward and not eager to paper over the problems. He's very honest about the problems with the institution he's taken over, which I think is healthy. And he comes across as honest.
We're going to go that way to continue on Upton.
And so when he promotes a bunch of people with problems...
So that was Upton and this is Upton.
I'm not immediately jumping to the conclusion like this guy is terrible.
Right.
It's
or that he even knew about it.
Maybe this is who is left at MPD. And so... who else is he going to promote? That kind of thing? I don't know. Just, and another thing, maybe you can speak to this, you're on audit, and I'm sorry to pile this up on you all at once here, but I've always wondered, like, who's leaving MPD? Hundreds of cops have left, and the assumption has always been, well, the ones who are remaining, these are the ones who want to be here.
These are the really committed ones?
The good ones. And I don't know that anyone has ever tried to establish with data that the people who left were the bad ones and the people who remain are the good ones. And I don't know if anyone has tried to establish that. Is there a way for you to have established that through the audit committee? Has the city even tried to examine that? I know for a while they weren't even doing exit interviews at MPD.
Yeah, that's a problem. I think we should do exit interviews across the board. I don't know how we'd have to find a way to objectively get criteria for what makes some of the problems that we say, are problems. Maybe it's discipline. Although even that gets a bit fraught. I think there's things that aren't coded as discipline that are problematic, right? When I, in 2014 maybe, simply had asked the question of our then chief, it was Chief Harteau, well, we have these 3 ways of getting officers, like recruiting officers, 4-year degree, or we help with their college, or they come through the Pathways program. There are these 3 tracks. I don't remember the specifics of these 3. And I simply asked, well, which one is the best, right? Like if you could get more of one, which would you choose? Which one gets us the best outcomes in terms of longevity in our department and a healthy career and a happy residents? How do we know what's working? And I learned how bad our record keeping was, that we didn't even know who had veterans preference when they first came in. We didn't track that. And how do you fix it? Oh, well, that would be such a big, long project. Well, something that energizes me for what's next, these next couple years, is no, really, how are we going to fix the problems of our police department for real, for the future? And we're going to have to invest in these things that are kind of mundane, kind of boring, but really important to being able to have metrics and data. I mean, I don't know that that's interesting to you, but I do think it's a part of really resetting our department in a way that's set up for the future, is doing some of these things that we never did in the past and was always kind of swept under the rug in terms of having really good information about our department.
Quarantine zombie outbreak.
Maybe this is how you feel, John. Let me out.
I've never been this deep into Ward 13. So deep that my camera failed.
We're beyond your broadcast area.
Yeah. How much longer are you going to do this? Be a council member, you think?
When I first came on, I thought I'd really like to beat Lisa Goodman
Beat Lisa Goodman?
in tenure.
Oh, in tenure.
I'm kidding. I don't know. I still have a lot of energy for this job. I work really hard. I'm energized about how we build the strong council end of a strong mayor system. I'm energized about the work that we have going forward with our police department and with public safety as a whole in our city. I think we have there's so much to keep on doing. I'm not someone that flees the scene, and I think I wouldn't want to leave the city right now, or the council right now, if it was my choice. It's up to the voters.
What do you think the big question is? I promise this is my final question, but what is the big question voters are having to make this year? Whether it's public safety or any other issue, they're going to vote, they're deciding between candidates, either here in Ward 13 or citywide. Mm-hmm. What are we deciding between?
That's a good question. I don't have a quick answer for it.
So the PACs are saying, the big Chamber of Commerce style PAC in the city, all of Minneapolis is saying it's about defund the police and abolish the police. The police could go away. You make the wrong decision, the police are going away. Yeah. Socialism's a big theme. People are attacking socialism. I wonder.
Are they attacking socialism, or are they attacking statements made by the DSA?
I mean, when I get the emails every day, and it's the socialists are going to destroy the city.
Would you consider yourself a socialist?
No.
Would you consider yourself DSA?
No.
Yeah, same.
But I'm friends with a lot of DSA types. Think about the DSA.
I work with DSA types every day at City Hall.
They are powering progressive movements, especially in Minneapolis, and I feel like it's maybe overblown to say they're going to destroy the city. They're doing a lot of good things in the city.
There were some statements made by the Twin Cities DSA that I found very disturbing.
The Hamas thing?
Mm-hmm. And I had personal conversations with one of my DSA colleagues who thought we could do better than making some kind of what I thought was a pretty broad statement about humanity in that moment. And he thought I was, fracturing and causing factions, and that this wouldn't be good to try to make a statement that maybe only 8 or 9 of us on the city council could make. And I said, okay, here, make it your own. And then there was no statement. But I think it is important to call out those inconsistencies, right? I grew up being Catholic, John. I can be Catholic and be, for birth control, and I can be for women in the priesthood, and I can be pro-choice. All of those things can be true, and I can be Catholic. I think the same thing can be true about our DSA colleagues, right? They can consider themselves DSA and reject some of the things that they don't agree with that the DSA says.
I feel like the PAC has more in mind than just the war in the peace in the Middle East and the war in the Middle East and terrorist attacks when they attack socialists, though. Have you had time to consider what is the question?
I think it's different in different parts of our city. I think what I find so strange about this race versus others in the past is that we're not having a big city conversation, right? I think about the things that have become these absolute hyper-focused questions like Bryant Avenue South, right? Or crime in Lyndhurst and East Harriet instead of the city as a whole. And I'm really feeling that, right? We need to be having conversations across these borders of wards. We're just having these 13 conversations in a vacuum, I fear, but for what you just said about the PACs and people who are playing into some of these races, not mine. Right. So I don't feel as influenced by those different groups right now, but they are at play. They're at play in 3 or 4 races pretty heavily, right? What that singular question is, what would you say it is? I don't know.
I don't know either. I think so I'll tell you what I think people are going to be voting on. I think people are still going to be voting on fear. I think that's what decided the 21 election. I think there are campaigns in the city that are really fear-mongering. And so I
think I'm in one of them. It's not me as a candidate. I mean, have you seen the double-wide billboard?
This is a weird circumstance in Ward 13 where it feels like 2 candidates who would think of themselves as moderates going at it. And so
I still think of myself as progressive, John.
I mean, you may be I don't know who is the more progressive candidate.
I don't know that my one challenger necessarily knows. I do want to acknowledge there's 3 people running against me.
So, Bob has said he won't take office if he wins, though.
Yeah, but I don't want to erase Zach Metzger as a candidate. He's important in his message and he has things he wants to say. So I actually don't agree to forums unless they at least invite every candidate.
Well, my camera failed here today, and so I'm signing off here with cell phone video. This is Council Vice President Linea Palmisano.
Thanks for spending time down here in the Fighting 13th, John.
Thanks for taking me on a very cold, runny nose, sniffling bike ride podcast episode. It's been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.